All right, so we're going to talk about that voice inside of your head. You know, the one when you're sitting somewhere, let's say like a coffee shop, and you might see a pretty girl walk in and you're like, dang, she's really pretty. The voice that you're uttering inside of your head is going to be there with you for the rest of your life, and it is actually defining everything about the reality in which you exist. So, this is where it's not what you see, it's what you know about what you see, because that's how you feel. And this is why the first thing that we were introducing you to is anxiety, because sometimes you're going to feel something that makes you feel scared. You're going to think a thought, and that thought that you're thinking is the same as actually acting on it. So, for instance, thinking about, oh no, this is going to be a bad experience. Well, it may not be a bad experience if you actually try it out. So, is the world becoming more conscious, or are you becoming more conscious of how unconscious everyone else is? For instance, I could sit here all day and tell you how to do things, but you're not going to do those things unless you believe that they are true. We must believe it because what is true must also be true for you. When a large number of people agree on something, it becomes a belief. This belief is unaffected by anything other than majority vote. Some beliefs have been passed down from generation to generation without question. Do you remember put a coat on, it's cold outside, or you'll get sick? This is a great example of a belief that has since evolved into a cultural delusion. In this case, the delusion is wearing a coat outside. What I am talking about here is called blank method. Did that voice did that voice in your mind know how to fill the blank? Here is where reality begins to change itself. So, based on what you know about what you see in this particular case, we're proving the point to you that the put a coat on when it's cold outside, you'll get sick is no longer really true. And that's due to the Wim Hof method. So, the Wim Hof method, if you haven't been on the health page yet, that's in our Homeostatic Line PDFs. We give you the book, we give you some of the research, we talk about the cold showers that you can do and new research. All you got to do is like stimulate a cold shower on a daily basis just to have that response. And congratulations, you're going to be a lot healthier and happier because of it. So these are the moments where, when you're observing something with Einstein's observer effect, your energy is projecting onto other masses in the universe, and it's literally you creating your own reality. So if you knew that blank right there, then you knew it was Wim Hof method. If you didn't know that blank, now you know that it's actually the Wim Hof method. So our entire perception of reality is based on frequencies, which we were exposed to as children. This is known as your family's resonant energy. The space in which they exist, you exist. As adults, these thoughts that we've been taught to think do not always work. How many different ways can you do the same thing? If there are thousands of ways to consume sugar, which is the most effective? Now, what is the best time to consume this version of sugar we found? When we live off the thoughts that we have been taught to think, there's a high chance that we might ignore the truth. What you're doing now may appear to be the best option, but what if it's the worst option ever devised? How would you know the difference? You would have no idea until you were acted upon by an unbalanced force that invalidated your current understanding. This understanding we have is simply the current flow through our minds, or the current that flows through our minds like water. This understanding we have is simply a current. Oh, geez, I'm just repeating myself here. The most important thing about your inner voice is to realize that your outer body requires high vibration conversation. How many times have you considered doing something but never followed through? When the mind contracts itself into unbalance, it rejects all versions of self improvement. Thoughts will remain in a straight line unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Have you ever thought how hard it would be to unlearn a thought that you have been thinking for the past 25 years? So this is where we were talking about, an object at rest remains at rest, and an object in motion remains in motion unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. So in your mind, when you learn to interpret reality in a little bit of a different way, that starts to create the unbalance. So whenever you look at a food that you know you used to eat that tasted really good, but you know you shouldn't eat anymore, you now have the information that's causing the unbalance where you're like, I actually shouldn't eat that, where the previous thought may have been, I'm just going to eat random things. Now, if you live off of the thoughts that you've been taught and those thoughts were wrong, like the wrong words take you to the wrong place and the right words take you to the right place, you're going to eventually realize that. And some people will live off of the wrong thoughts for their entire life and never change because they don't want to unbalance their life. It doesn't feel good. So you have to ask yourself one simple question. Like, try to remember how to do something. Why do you remember what you remember about that something that you're going to try to do? So in this case, I think to myself, I'm going to fast, or I'm going to think about brain derived neurotrophin factor. And how many ways can I compare that specific thought in my head based on what I've been taught? If you've never heard of brain derived neurotropic factor before, there's not too many things that you can kind of parallel. And if you don't know what BDNF is, go to the health page, download the Homeostatic Line. That PDF is going to give you some books, some information, and some research papers about it. So you have more context to be able to apply to reality in different situations to help yourself better understand, okay, when my brain tells me I shouldn't do that, maybe I should listen to it, because now I have enough information to be able to listen and learn that that's not actually the right thing to do. So we often only remember what works and what doesn't work. We don't question if our shoes work until our socks get wet. Do you think about not putting your shoes on today when you go outside? Or did you think about not putting your shoes on today when you went outside? So, like, we have a lot of these just automatic functions. Like, I know that I have to wear clothes when I go outside. And I'm the type of person that learned at one point in time that you only get so many thoughts in a day before your brain starts to just atrophy away. So, like, in the very morning, you're supposed to do the hardest thing first. And I think that's a book about eating some frogs or something, but you're always supposed to do the hardest thing that you know you don't want to do first thing in the morning. So for some people, that's like go exercise. Like if your brain is like, I don't want to exercise today, you get up, you use 5 second rule by Mel Robbins, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then you time block an hour by Gary Keller. And for this next hour, your entire mindset is going to be focused on, I am going to go exercise. Even when you tell yourself that you don't want to, and you're going to tell yourself that you don't want to. I actually spent 3 months not going to the gym to specifically find out what it would be like to lose a habit and then recreate that habit. I would literally tell myself, like, I'm going to go to the gym. And then on the way to the gym, I would convince myself to not go to the gym. I would literally have a conversation with the voice inside of my head on how I wasn't going to go to the gym or didn't need to go to the gym. So, this voice inside of your head is going to be your best friend. Now, from the previous document, if you've read The Living in the Illusion and the Fear of Truth by Osho, you realize no matter where you go, you're bringing yourself with you. So if you were in a bad relationship and you never healed from that bad relationship, you're still that person that was in that bad relationship. You might need to heal from those things. So as we mentioned in the last document about anxiety, this thought cannot be created nor destroyed, only perceived as different forms of the same thing. There's no difference in living off of incorrect answers as if they were correct. And I lived off of the incorrect answers for way too long, to the point where it was like, pay bill or drugs. It was drugs 100% of the time. You're like, it's fine. I can go a month behind on this. That's no big deal. It is a very big deal, and those decisions compound and take you to a very dark and dangerous place. So, consider energy converting from one form into another in this manner. You've had a long relationship with someone and believe that this was the most amazing experience you've ever had based on no prior comparisons, which means most people's first relationship is amazing because you have no ability to compare and contrast a lot of necessities in life, such as my first relationship. I thought it was amazing until I met the next person and some girl held my hand first. I was the person that initiated everything. So when you realize, whoa, okay, I was neglected when I thought I was in love. It's actually neglect. So this will be the best experience of your life because you have nothing to compare it with. A wise soul once said that comparison is a thief of joy. You have no idea how good it was, but you know that it made you feel good. Emotional responses are not always accurate because they are based on the motion of your energy. There is no foundation for comparing and contrasting the various forms of the same things that exist in a particular experience. So imagine your next relationship revamping how much you were neglected in the first. Would this cause you to question yourself or them? I was convinced that my first relationship was the most amazing relationship I ever had until I met the next person. How do you know that love isn't neglect? They are different forms of the same thing in this case. So for me, it was really recognizing that, okay, like what thoughts was I taught to think? And how did those actually make me happy? And then when I realized, okay, I actually didn't even know how to be happy because all the thoughts that were floating around in my brain were all based on negativity. So when you're looking at relationships that you have with your family, your friends, your significant other, those are all going to be based on the thoughts that you've been taught to think. It's why whenever you decide to change your life, or if nobody in your family has ever been an entrepreneur and you decide to become an entrepreneur, they're going to advise against it because maybe they chose the safe route and they think to themselves, oh no, like you shouldn't do that. And a great example would be I was literally working with a person that grew up in a very sheltered environment and they literally just thought they couldn't do things. Their parents told them that they need to go work a job and get experience before they decide to become an entrepreneur, when in reality, you have like one personal trainer that works at a gym, and then you have one personal trainer that just invests in somebody's program and then makes $1 million. So you got the guy that's stuck driving to work, working with a person stuck in a physical building, and you got the other person working on the internet making $1 million because they decided to probably not listen to the thoughts they've been taught to think growing up, and they took a risk. And risks sometimes lead to the greatest rewards. So it seems as though improving the conversations we have with ourselves are all about a higher vibration conversation. So, in another document down below, we'll talk about the force mass acceleration conversation that's going to help you just start to spiral in life and really improve the quality. Best example here would be, I think actually Al wrote this. He was talking about the same fear that you feel of cold calling a person is the same thing as actually cold calling the person. Let me actually look at that really quickly. So yeah, right here. How many of you have made money from thinking about cold calling versus actually cold calling? The more you do it, the easier it gets. If you're too scared, you need to get out of your head. Do this. Go to a touristy part of town and ask one person every day for 30 days to dance with you. This will alleviate any scariness you feel in your heart, your mind, and your lower tummy. You don't have to dance long if they say yes, but you need to take some sort of action to get the nerves out of you. And this is where the contraction and expansion, that's why we started off with anxiety. Anxiety cannot be created nor destroyed, or only converted from one form into another. It's always going to exist. You can't magically get rid of it. You can only redevelop a better relationship. You can only reinterpret the way that you're actually experiencing things in reality. So, where one person, that sounds like a nightmare, to another person, that sounds like a lot of fun. So if you would ask me 7 years ago, talk to a person, way too much anxiety for that. I thought the world was out to get me. And now, geez, I love talking to people. There's a lady that came in the coffee shop. She poked her head over. She was looking for her coffee. And I was like, oh, I accidentally drank your coffee. And then she starts laughing, and bam, oxytocin. Perfect experience by just making a joke. So instead of sitting inside of your own head, which is probably the worst place to be, sometimes it was the worst place for me. It was a pure toxic environment, nightmare smoothie floating around up there for me. But you got to have a higher vibration conversation with yourself. So in order to obtain higher vibration conversation with ourselves, we must go through 4 different stages. Now, to give you some background on this, there was, when I first moved to the forest, I met this dude at a coffee shop, and I guess he was like a retired philosopher. Somebody said he was crazy, but he was just severely misunderstood because he was separated from like the normal train of thought that a person would normally think, to the point where he just kind of didn't make sense unless you were into the same thing as him. So he taught me about the huh, oh, ah, and then the aha moment. So if you've never heard of BDNF, you're probably thinking, huh? What's that? We experience this when we don't have enough information to understand something. Oh, that makes sense. When we learn more about a topic that seems true based on previous information. So many of us stop at the O unless we have prior knowledge about a particular topic to engage our mind in learning more. Sufficient interest in an idea is required to make it further into understanding. Ah, so all it takes is learning more about something to understand something. Once you've reached the phase in life, you can now figure out if you should apply this new concept to your life. When we learn to turn an idea into an action, we reach the aha moment, finally realizing how this random word changes the entire way a human would live a life. So, for instance, when you first hear about something, you'd say, like, huh? Like, what's that? If you're curious, you're going to say, huh? Or if you learn something, you're going to say, oh, and then you're just going to continue to go on. You're like, oh, that's cool. Or, huh? What's that? Like curiosity kills cats, not people. So once you go from the huh phase to like, oh, that's what it is. And if you have enough information about it, you go to the like I can see the value of that. And then once you start to apply it to your life, you reach that aha moment where for me, it was learning about eating healthier. And I was like, huh? I was like, eating this is wrong. I was like, what is this person talking about? And then I was like, oh, okay, so that's what they're talking about. And then I started to learn more about other places, and I was like, ah, so that's why they're saying that. And then after doing it for like 5, 6, 7 months, I said, aha, this is why. And now it all makes sense. So at first, when somebody's like, yeah, make 6 figures online from doing social media marketing, somebody might say, huh? And then they look at something. So if you go look at the online page, you'd say, oh, so this is what it looks like. And then as you start to learn the information, you look at Google Maps and you see nothing. And then you look at Google Maps and you see a gold mine. So you go, ah. And then when you finally start to do it yourself, you reach that aha moment where you're calling people, you're recognizing that these type of things work, and your entire reality changes based off of a huh. So one of the hardest things to recognize in reality is when huh is actually the most important thought to chase after. Like when you see something, you're like, huh, what's that? And then the other side of that, huh, moment is actually some of the most life changing information that you ever get the chance to experience. That's probably one of the hardest things to recognize. Like, where are those moments that I don't understand anything? And if I decide to understand something about this specific topic, that my entire life changes. So, like, huh, for me was like eating vegetables. I was like, huh, no. And then as I decided to learn about it, I was like, oh, ah, yeah, whoa. So it's difficult to understand when a moment that makes you say, huh, is actually one of the most important things you will ever decide to learn. I never thought that reading a book about health would change every single food that I ate. The first several books made me say, huh? Is this bad or is this wrong? The next set made me say, oh, this is bad. After eating some of the suggestions in the books, I said, ah, this is why they say you should be living your life a specific way. After a few years of learning, I realized, aha, my entire perspective was wrong. As you can see, what was once correct is now incorrect. What begins as confusion turns into clarity if you seek understanding your own thoughts. You're reading these words, right? Or listening. So, a big takeaway from this is truly try to think if there's these people out there telling you, hey, this is like a really good way to live life. Like, you can change everything about it if you decide to just go do this. You're not going to understand anything about it at first. But if you simply trust the fact that somebody has your best interests in mind, which, unfortunately on the internet doesn't seem like a lot of people do, but if you're able to decipher whether or not somebody is actually being honest with you and cares, you will be able to change your life so much faster. So this is one of those moments where, okay, like, do I actually know? No, I don't. Does this person know? Well, it seems like they know. It looks like they know, and it feels like they know. So this was one of those moments where the huh, you concede your entire reality to somebody else's, and by simply recognizing that all the thoughts that you've been taught to think are wrong, you actually get the ability to find the right ones. Where I used to wake up in a place and my brain said everything about life sucks. I wake up and I say everything about life is amazing. So that is a real experience where you can take the thoughts that you've been taught to think and change them. But if you've been thinking those thoughts for the past 25 years and they've kind of worked, why change them in the first place, right? So, the classic definition of knowing is to be aware through observation, inquiry, and information. This means that one must be aware of the observation, the reason for inquiry, and the actual use of the information to know what they are supposed to know. We cannot expect someone to use something that doesn't exist in their reality because it simply just doesn't exist. Like, if you don't know about something, you just don't know. Like, it's not your fault that you ended up somewhere, you just didn't have the information you needed. I was missing a lot of information about life and ended up in a very bad place. That's why I make videos like this because, well, if somebody else had these problems, here's your solution in more than enough ways, shapes, and forms that I hope you actually take some of the advice on this website. And there's going to be more videos down below. Check all the books. Did you read them all yet? No, maybe not, but you should because they're all useful. You have already started reading and observing this information as a part of your inquiry to know more than you know now. What you choose to use will be what you know how to use. This is where it's not what you see, it's what you know about what you see because that's how you feel. Or in this case, it's not what you hear, it's what you've heard because that's what you're actually hearing. So, like, did you find any good key takeaways from this? Are you taking notes? How many breaths did you take in the past 30 seconds? And how many times did you blink? These are the types of moments where our subconscious would kick in, and we may be in flow right now listening to a video on the internet that's been playing for 19 minutes and 50 seconds. Maybe not. Everyone knows that more words will appear as we move our eyes across this page. What the eyes are looking for is all the eyes know how to see. You know something about these words that no one else knows, which makes their meaning unique. This knowledge is one of the four phases. It's simple to know that we're reading words right now. What if you already missed a really important part? If you didn't see any words next to this, that would probably mean this book has ended. When you learn something, how do you know it's true? How can you trust a statement without really knowing? You're aware of your knowledge and your ignorance, and if you're unsure about something, consider whether ignorance is preferable to knowledge. You may learn things that you wish to unlearn, but life is all about learning. And what I would say in this case is like there's certain things that I wish I could actually unlearn that I taught myself, and one of them would be reading body language. Then to give you an example of why, you got to be very careful about what you learn. Sometimes it's okay to have ignorance. Like they say, ignorance is bliss. I refuse to learn about birds. I don't want to know when I hear a bird chirp in a forest or somewhere else. I want to be thinking to myself, oh, that's this type of bird. I just simply want to be able to relax, exist, hear birds chirp, and stay within my own thoughts without having something to compare and contrast against. So, why I didn't like body language in this case was I actually met a girl. I knew her for a really long time, about like 7 years, I think 8 years, somewhere around there. I think 7 or 9. I really don't know how long it was. And the first time around I met her, I was a really terrible person. So I just wasn't into the same things I was into now. So I ruined that experience. And about 4 years later, we reconnected, spent some time together. It was great. I moved her up to live with me. And I started reading body language books. And I started to recognize, okay, every time I went near this person, they would always put their phone down. They would always be on their phone. And like, it was just, there were some things that were a red flag. So one day, and maybe people disagree with this, but whatever. I was like, what you doing? She's like, oh, nothing. And when people say nothing, they're always doing something. And I was like, nah, for the past couple of weeks, like this person's been like kind of hiding their phone with me. They've been giving me signs and signals that they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And then I said, well, can I see nothing? And then they're like, oh, texting my friend. And I was like, She ended up texting her ex boyfriend. So I'm sitting here doing work. She's texting her ex boyfriend across from me, asking him for money. And the insane part in this place is like, hmm, I remember specifically realizing you had a bad laptop and buying you a $1,700 laptop, and now you're asking your ex boyfriend for money. You should have just asked me. So, in those moments, I wish I could have unlearned body language because maybe that relationship would still be working, but I recognized some signs of deceit. And I'm not the type of person that's going to shy away from being like, well, who are you talking to? Like, what are you doing? Because I'm the type of person that's like, here's the passcode to my phone. You can go through it absolutely anytime that you want if you're ever concerned, worried, or have doubts of my loyalty to you. So to some people, that might be insane and crazy. But to me, I give that expectation to somebody else. So I would hope it's reciprocated, where like I'm with you because I want to be with you, not because I'm just here and now. So, that person's living in another state, married to somebody else. And it's insane how people go from like single to like married in like less than months. And you're just like, geez, what even was this experience? So something I wish I could unlearn would be body language because you really can't unsee it. Like it's not what you or sorry, it's not what you know about what you see that creates how you feel. Yeah, sorry, just totally mind fart there. But it's not what you see, it's what you know about what you see because that's how you feel. And once I started learning body language, I was like, I caught myself like staring at a person's feet and being like, oh, they're pointing that way. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to keep you. It looks like you got somewhere to go. And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm going to be late. And I was like, huh. And then I started really realizing that that was an actual thing. And then so like take away from this real quick, pay attention to where people's feet point. If they're pointing at you, they're interested in the conversation. If legs going left or right, they got somewhere to be and it's not with you. So imagine thinking you know something about life only to find out that you were experiencing the worst imaginable anguish every day and you were completely numb to it. That was my entire life. I had no idea that everything that I was doing was wrong and was just taking me to a place of suffering. If you don't know anything else, what you're experiencing right now is all there is to experience. Like if you have nothing to compare and contrast your thoughts against, whatever you're thinking is probably the best thing ever. That's why I tell everybody like read 50 to like 500 to maybe 1,000 books and you'll realize, whoa, I was missing a lot of information about reality. This is where the pursuit of knowledge becomes a risk and reward. You risk invalidating your own reality, but the reward is a new one. And I'm going to tell you right now that it's very hard to read books that tell you you are wrong. And then you don't want to listen. And then you read some research papers and they tell you you're wrong. And then you read another book and you're like, God, I'm still wrong. But you are selfish and you're hard headed and you don't want to listen. And then you read another book and then they say you're wrong. And then you're wrong and you're wrong and you're wrong. And to give you an example of this, once I started getting into mindfulness, I met a girl and she was into mindfulness. And I was like, yo, look at this dude skateboard. He like broke his leg, his bones hanging out. And she's like, I don't want to see that. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, just check this video out. And she's like, I don't want that in my space. And I was a little bit offended by it. But then I read 37 books on mindfulness that month. And then I came back to her and I apologized because I didn't understand that people have like this space and they don't want certain things in their energy. And I was just, wow, like I really didn't know any better. And I apologized for it. So I had no idea I was suffering until I learned what pain and suffering were. This writing is going to challenge you in ways you never imagined writing could. If you take these challenges, your life will improve in ways you could have never imagined possible. I only ask to give yourself over to these words that speak to you. I might be more like you than you realize, but with imagination, you are limitless and endless, and all things are possible. Pause when the words truly speak to you and consider why these random letters make you feel or think something. Every word in this writing is meaningless unless it means something to you. Simply put, consider whether you are seeking the secrets or the secrets are seeking you. Just as one person's entire life is condensed into a sentence, another's is recreated and lived into the present. Let my inner voice further validate yours. Is your life getting better or worse as you move your eyes across these pages? You haven't learned anything yet, have you? So this is where you kind of really ask yourself, like, why are you here? What are you looking for? Are you going to find it? And once you do find it, what are you going to do with it? Because remember, right words, right place, wrong words, wrong place. Changing a behavior takes a lot of time. So even if you're looking at the secrets right now in front of you, you might not be able to see them just yet. And it takes time. So that's where, if you read Living in the Illusion of the Fear of Truth by Osho, you read that book once, you're going to see something from it. You're going to say, huh? Oh. Read it again. Ah. Now live that book a little bit. Aha. Majority of us are living in this illusion and we fear the truth that we can be successful, we can be happy, we can help people, we can do anything that we've ever wanted to do in our entire life. And remember, the best and worst that anybody's ever going to do in their entire life is think a thought, and it's up to you whether or not that thought actually matters, because matter can't matter unless it matters to you. So what matters to you? Now, when we speak of knowing, it all comes from within. People will only know what you're willing to tell them about yourself. There's no secret that inner dialogue occurs within our minds on a daily basis. This inner voice interprets everything we experience based on what we have experienced. Many of us feel crippled by fear of judgment that never actually comes. An experience taught us a thought, and we continue to think this thought even if it prevents us from creating a better life. We learn in time that it's not what we see or hear that matters, it's what we know about what we see or hear that matters, because matter can only matter if it matters to you. What matters also creates feeling. We could both see and hear the same thing, but feel it in a different way. This interchangeability of matter is based on our internal energies' understanding of matter. Einstein's observer effect, which we speak of next, if you seem to be feeling something I am not feeling, we are on different wavelengths of reality. When we are out of resonance with each other, the question, what's the matter, comes up. What doesn't matter has no meaning, and without meaning, no definition. So imagine it this way. I think this, do we talk about the coffee shop in this one right here? I don't think we do. Let me see really quickly. So in this case, imagine me and you are sitting in a coffee shop, right? And somebody walks in the coffee shop, and that is happens to be your boyfriend. And your boyfriend's holding hands with another girl. You I don't know you. I just met you. You see your boyfriend holding hands with a girl. Shattered. Shattered look on your face. Me, I look over and I see nothing. Because it's not what you see, it's what you know about what you see. Because that's how you feel. And you just saw your boyfriend holding hands with somebody, and I can see it on your face, and I'm wondering what's the matter. And I can't tell what's the matter because I have no ability to interpret the energy that you're currently interpreting. So a normal person would say, what's the matter? You know, it's pretty common stuff. So, like these words that we use, like, what's the matter? Like, why do people say that? It's because you're literally interpreting matter all around you at every single moment of the day. So, does your mouth mumble these words? Or do you silently process them in your mind? Like when you're reading something, do you mumble them in that voice inside of your head? Or do you just silently somehow scroll across these without like muttering in your brain? We say these words together. Like I'm mumbling them to myself and writing them down on this page right now. This means that if you're reading these words, you've reached a point of energetic resonance outside of time. This is a pocket of space time where energy was stored, a moment where I ask you to pause and think about that statement. What moments happened in your past that are being used to define your present that ultimately creates your future? How did you end up here reading this? Why are you reading this? Your internal energy is being used in this very moment for interpretation. We will talk about energetics and physics in a later chapter. This vibrational energy I hold now holds you. The ability to interpret this jumble of vibrational energy has given us a sense of whom, what, and where we are. Everyone is aware of the small things that help one another interface with a shared reality. You're aware of your age. You're aware of what you do for a living. You are well known and understood by yourself, right? When someone asks you who you are, you tell us about your life experiences. And this is the untethered soul from Michael A. Singer type stuff. This knowledge is necessary, and there's little point in questioning these aspects of reality. To prove this, I ask you how many breaths you've taken since you've started reading this, or in this case, you've been listening for 31 minutes. How many breaths do you think you've taken? I have no clue. You shouldn't have a clue either unless you're some sort of special human that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, which I don't think you are. I'm sure you don't know how many you have taken since you've written this. And this is where we start to recognize, okay, we're reading something. This is energetics. We're exchanging our energy with this. Same thing with brain-derived neurotrophin factor. You either understand exactly how to apply it to your life and have had a test done by a doctor, or you have never heard of it before and didn't even know that you could go get your BDNF levels tested from a doctor. So there's a lot to learn to interpret reality a proper way. And all you got to do is just absorb information. Just create more mass to express your energy onto others. And then you just learn more. Life gets better in time. If it's not great right now and you want it to be great, just think space you're in, so you go to the energy you have that explains the mass in the universe, and it's only going to be positive, negative, or neutral. So do you want to be feeling positive, negative, or do you want to take some things that are negative into the neutral realm? Because you can do all of these things. You're literally able to do anything. Now, when you venture deeper into understanding why you think the thoughts you think, know that it's only you who thinks them. Sometimes in reality, you might be thinking the same thing as somebody else. Like when I say red Miata, are you thinking about getting on an airplane, flying to Illinois, buying a car? The warehouse next to you is lighting on fire, apparently. And then, the guy that you're buying the car from is like, oh my gosh, this place is lighting on fire. And then you drive your car back and you're tired. And then you get here and then you order your coilovers, you order your wheels, you pay a person to help you set this stuff up. Like, you thinking about that? Are you thinking about the blizzard that's supposed to rain about 2 feet of snow on you here in the next day or two? So this is where we really understand that, like, I am the only person that thinks the thoughts when I say red Miata out loud. You may have individual experiences with the red Miata, however, I do as well. And the chances of us sharing those experiences is probably like none. But the chances of us experiencing the same thoughts when we have read the same book is very likely. Like if I say The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer and you've read that, we both get it. We're both on the same page. We're both thinking similar thoughts. The most important part of this voice is knowing that while one person experiences fear, another is capable of experience happiness in the same situation. This would be Einstein's observer effect and the laws of motion, which we'll speak about in a later chapter. One action has the complete and opposite reaction that is dependent on the observer's internal energy. This opposing reaction comes from the opposite understanding of a situation, which is the expression of one's internal energy having resonated with a different source. If your mind has been trained with the expectation given by others, then your experience it can be no more than the thoughts that you have been taught to think. There is nothing wrong with these thoughts of others. However, this is where you have to ask yourself if they work. As a small child, any information about the world is going to work. As an adult, this conversation you've had with yourself over the past 20 years might not serve you anymore. You can't be afraid to talk to a stranger when strangers give you everything. You were a stranger to yourself at one point. This strange reason why you ended up in this strange place you may not like. You decided to go there. You have to know the difference between your thoughts and the thoughts of others at this point. Is this your voice? Is this voice yours or someone else's? I know my mind is filled with the voices of others, but these voices were chosen. I decided to surrender myself to the because the thoughts that I was taught to think didn't work anymore. When you go from making $420 a week to more than $800 in a 20-minute conversation, reality doesn't seem real. So when we're looking at this stuff right here, you got to think to yourself, as a child, you're taught a bunch of stuff. And if you had childhood trauma, that's why we gave you children of emotionally immature parents up above. If you had childhood trauma, it is literally affecting you from getting to where you want to be in your life. Like, it is standing in your way in more ways, shapes, and forms that you could ever possibly comprehend unless you start to learn about it and realize, whoa, this is why I'm afraid to do this. Because I was told that I was dumb, stupid, and incapable as a child. And like I said in the last video, no matter how many people send me messages saying I completely changed their life, I am terrible, absolutely horrible at receiving words of affirmation. I will constantly work to prove myself to others, even when I've proven myself 10 times over. There's always a better way that I can help somebody else, isn't there? So when I get a message from somebody that's like, yeah, I'm making this much money right now, and like, that's a lot of money for a person, and I'm like, great, who can I help next? Or when somebody loses 120 pounds and reads 115 books and they want to buy the gut test, I'm like, awesome, sweet, who's next? So when you recognize that the things that you experienced as a child are going to manifest as an adult in ways, shapes, and forms that don't make sense. Like, as a child, you might eat candy. As an adult, probably shouldn't eat candy. There's no real value in it. Like, you don't know any better as a kid, and you're just like, your brain's going off like the 4th of July. You don't know any better. So that worked when you were a kid, but now when you're an adult, you can't do that stuff. Like being responsible, cleaning your room, doing things like that, the things you hated to do as a kid, they make sense as an adult. Like if your room is messy, probably got a messy mind. Because if you look at other people that have, like, normal things in life, people living in the matrix, that's a whole different conversation. Like, everybody's in the matrix. If you're watching this video, you're in the matrix. Hello. The only way to leave is to, like, go live in the forest and live off the land. Congratulations, you're now out of the matrix. But for everybody else, you might as well just learn to use it in a way that makes your life better. Like, instead of suffering with money, you reevaluate your understanding of money, and then you just fix your problems, and then you solve them, and then you don't have those problems anymore. And then you're like, well, what do I focus on now that I don't have problems? So when I say about, like, making $420 a week to making more than $800 in a 20-minute conversation, yeah, like, I'm at the point where I'm teaching strangers how to make more money than I ever made in my life at one point. And I think that's cool. But we're going to continue to do that until I take nap 9,000 at some point in time, whenever that day comes. But it's not today. So if you're watching this video, I'm probably still alive. So the thoughts we were taught to think goes something like this. And this is a really important thing to understand. This is why it's like, I'll tell you this. If I meet somebody and they don't have expectations, like in business, I want to know your expectations. Like, what are your expectations? So I can understand if I can meet them or not. And in relationships, a person needs to have expectations. Like, if somebody doesn't have expectations, I don't want to talk to them because I have no ability to know whether or not I can exceed your expectations. Like, exceeding the standard, exceeding the expectations, everybody wants that. So you have to know a person's expectations. And if you're doing this, you might not know their expectations and completely accidentally invalidate their entire reality where they feel unheard. And when somebody doesn't feel heard, I can tell you they're either going to speak up or they're going to repress those emotions until they decide to blow up or maybe throw up. I don't know. So, anyways, if we go on a date to the movies and your expectation was that I pay and buy you popcorn, what happens when I don't? The expectation that you were taught about reality didn't occur. This invalidated your internal voice, making you feel completely unheard, even if you didn't say anything, as if reality wasn't exactly what you thought it was. This is an example of an internal voice speaking out of habit. It's either been told or expected or has experienced enough scenarios to project thoughts forward to create its own future. Creating your own future is extremely important, but when this voice is creating expectations that set you up for a feeling of failure, you set your ups for a disappointment. And that's like where we're disappointed in things, but we never actually said anything about it. So that disappointment that we're experiencing is kind of our fault. Like, I probably should have told them that I don't like that. Or, hey, excuse me, sorry. These are my expectations. The expectations have been created by what you know. We all experience things we know about the world to happen. We expect the things we know about the world to happen. What you could equally, what you know could equally be wrong as it is right. You hold an expectation, and so do I. Some expectations, like getting popcorn, are not as important as treating someone with respect. We do not we are not mind readers, but I'm going to teach you how to read minds. Or sorry, but I'm going to teach you how to read your own mind. You know the thoughts you know because you know yourself better than you might. Yeah, sorry. You know the thoughts you know better because they know you better than you might know yourself. Jeez, word fumble. And this is where it's like you know the things you know better than anybody else because you know yourself better than anyone else. Why else would one person wake up today and have a great day while the other person's simply fall apart? My life used to fall apart and get worse every day until I decided to take control of it. So try to start building a relationship with your internal voice like this. How many, and this is honestly one of the most important things right here. Like how many times have you thought something in your mind and you never taken action on that thought? Like how many times have you, and this is like I'll speak from a person that's single. I used to see a person and I was like, dang, she's so beautiful, my gosh. And you know what I would do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I would just let that experience pass by my reality and never say anything because I was scared. The internal voice for me was like this absolutely anxiety ridden place of self defeat and nightmare for me. I wanted something, I would never go get it. But how many times have you been thinking of something and you've never acted upon it? What if not taking action creates distrust with yourself? What happens when you no longer trust yourself? You wanted to compliment somebody, but decided not to out of hesitation or fear. More distrust. You felt unheard but never spoke up. More distrust. A cute person walks in and the internal dialogue in your mind says, wow, they are beautiful, but you never told them. More distrust. Imagine that you've been living your life thinking these thoughts and never taking action on these thoughts because you can't trust yourself. This constant loss of trust in ourselves by ignoring our internal voice eventually completely disconnects the inner voice. We could never trust ourselves again, could we? How far off track from reality that you have wanted to create do you think you would be when you don't believe your own thoughts? My reality was based on the thoughts of others. All of my thoughts created nothing but suffering. So when I'm looking at this, I think to myself, whoa, it took me about 2.5 years to actually start speaking on social media, to actually start putting my voice out there. Like 2.5 years of knowing I knew a little bit better than majority of the people out there, but it still took me a long time to actually speak up. And then I remember, like, if you followed 50 Brain Cell Challenge, if you follow the health stuff that I teach, that 50 Brain Cell Challenge, I literally spent about 2 to 3 hours a day in the grocery stores, wandering around the shelves, going to different grocery stores, going to like more poverty based neighborhoods and going to their grocery stores and being like, whoa, all the off brands of food and everything in this grocery store is garbage. And then go to like the richer neighborhoods and being like, okay, they got the whole foods, they got all the healthy foods, ingredients. And then going to like the kind of generalized areas and you're just starting to like connect all the dots with society, the way it's formed and the function of it. And then counting all the ingredients of everything on the shelves, looking at the dietary fiber ratios, I would immediately know when a new product ended up on the shelf. And I'm like, oh, okay. So now they're switching up glycemic index modifiers by using tapioca starch instead of cornstarch. Oh, they're using potato starch over here. Potato starch. So, like, really understanding these things. I didn't speak up about it. And I wanted to, but it took me a really long time because I had anxiety and I was like, oh, well, you know, well, I don't know. But I knew. And then when I made that first video, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of other people that agreed upon it. And there are thousands of people that download the 50 Brain Cell Challenge weekly. It's pretty great. $0 in ad spend, thousands of people. It's the most beautiful thing ever. But what you have to recognize here is even if you know better, depending on the things that you've experienced in your past, you might not speak up. You might not stand up and say something. But I challenge you today, if you know something and you know that something, get a little bit of arrogance because people aren't going to be thinking you're arrogant. They're going to say, he's smart and I want to learn. Because when you learn to put your feelings aside for the sake of improving your reality, you will in fact improve your reality. So don't go around the world being like, oh no, like that person's mean. Like, don't even try to think that. You'll never know them, you never meet them. What information are they giving you and how can it value your life? So, distrust, we're going to look for it every single day, all day long. People will find an experience, like for instance, people think my program's a pyramid scheme. What? You'll find out if you decide to join that it's not. that you can go do whatever you want with it. But that right there is a self-defeating behavior inside of somebody else, where they're like, well, well, I don't want my problems to be solved. Where it's like, oh, well, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to take some pills for anxiety, or I'm going to get a medical marijuana card for anxiety, rather than just like solve it and go live the most amazing life you never thought possible. If you asked me 7 years ago, would I be here right now doing this or giving people books to read? Having never read a book at one point in my life, yeah, would have never thought I'd be here. But guess what? We are. Where's here? No clue. So, yeah. When we move into thought energy, it's classified into two types: artificial and natural. Artificial energy is man made energy, derived from feelings that we do not always need to identify with, such as anger and pain. Natural energy is derived from the flow of everyday life. Artificial energy has negative consequences because it disrupts the natural cycle of coming and going. Natural energy is infinite because it's based on the natural comings and going. Artificial energy reduces creativity and focuses while also limiting resources for the task at hand. Natural energy manifests itself as creativity and focuses on the task at hand. Choosing artificial energy implies rejecting reality in oneself. This artificial version of energy that no longer serves you is the only thing that stands in your way of natural energy. Tapping into energy feels natural when we think about something that makes us extremely excited and effortlessly carry that excitement throughout the day. The goal is to teach you how to tap into that natural energy regardless of circumstance. The process of tapping into natural energy opens our hearts. And trust me, as a guy that had an emotionally immature parent, that wasn't loved, that was neglected, eh, like if you're having a hard time finding somebody to love you, you might be having a hard time loving yourself. So even when someone tries to love you, that ain't happening. That's at least my personal experience and why I chalk up the fact that I was in great relationships, but I ruined every single one of them because I didn't love myself. So you were definitely not going to be able to love me. To open our hearts means to be able to feel, think, and act without shame. Self awareness is the first step towards self liberation. If we want to be able to feel without being limited by emotion, its intensity, or frequency, we must choose to feel rather than react. If we react without first listening, we're attempting to change our feelings without first understanding entirely what we are feeling. We rarely feel more than one emotion at a time, rarely feeling without thinking, and even less frequently simply sit with these thoughts and feelings. This immediate action is telling ourselves that we will try to change how we feel before fully understanding how we feel, which creates deep distrust. Imagine you were talking to a friend, and every time you started talking about your ex, he would interrupt you and change the subject. You'd get frustrated and stop trying to bring it up, even though you desperately needed to talk to somebody. You try another friend once again. He changes the subject after 2 words. A third friend does the same until you realize that no one wants to talk about it, so you'll just have to figure it out yourself. Do you know how to figure it out? Now, imagine if the roles were actually reversed. You tried to talk to yourself about your ex. You got in 2 words and you distracted yourself. Consider how many times you tried until you gave up. Consider that the only person who will hear you is an outsider who will never fully comprehend the experience. There would always be some listening to do that only you could understand, but you would desperately try to avoid bringing it up. Maybe you got in 3 words, and it was so overwhelming that you just labeled it as a pain instead of understanding what was really going on. It got to the point where all you could say to someone else was, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm in a bad mood. Now the circle's complete. Someone may come along who has a similar experience, who has a similar enough experience to provide some relief in knowing that we're not alone. However, there is still a blockage in our heart. The natural flow of things coming and going that only pre-active acceptance will solve. This is open-hearted. Words are truly powerful, and the ones you speak to yourself have all the power. You give power to the powerless thoughts in your mind. So now, if you want to reverse engineer your future, enjoy the text document. And then we're going to get rid of this text below the line right here because this text right here was actually a link going over to the 50% off that we have here. I was just like, yeah, we'll leave that there, maybe take that off there. But if you click that link, that's probably going to be not there. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And just to kind of summarize on here, let me click over where we're at, Quillbot. I'm getting lost. So just to summarize over here, where we at? Where'd that document go? Oh no, I clicked off of it. Boom. The voice inside of your head is going to be there with you for the rest of your life. And the thoughts that you've been taught to think, you will think. If you can't think your way out of something that you don't want to be thinking anymore, all you have to do is learn more about something to be able to reinterpret and understand the world that you live in. If you don't know the blank blank method, because put a coat on, it's cold outside, you'll get sick, isn't true anymore, you might want to learn things like that. And I'll tell you from a personal experience that I was 24 years old when I recognized that I could do this. Ready? Ready for this? Ready for this? Recognizing that I could just breathe and calm myself down and focus and realize that all of these things that I'm going through, somebody else out there in the world might be going through them. And then I began to start to ask myself, like, how many people who are experiencing something bad are going to pick up maybe a book and read it, and then read like 5 more on the topic, and then read 20 more on the topic. So if you enjoyed this video, my challenge to you is read all of the books up above that we gave you in that PDF, one by one, line by line. I put all the books in an order that if I were to reread, here's how I would reread these. Because if you learn a little bit too much about mindfulness and spirituality before you learn about how to actually get the life that you want to live, you might think it's okay suffering when it's actually very bad to suffer. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next video. The link over here to the left is going to give you this document if you'd like to download it, read it yourself. I'm sure you're going to always find some spelling errors in my content, and I apologize in advance for that. But ask yourself one question. Are you thinking your thoughts? Or are you thinking the thoughts that somebody else taught you? And now all you have to do is ask yourself, when I wake up tomorrow, do I love everything that I'm about to do, or do I not like it? And if you don't like it, remember, you're going to be the one that has to change it. So I'll see you in the next video.